unleashing female power.
Being a disruptor.
I'm always constantly telling the truth.
I love
art. That's all her life.
She's alive and female.
Being a woman, what it meant.
Prove him wrong.
Girls run the world.
We're rocking the place.
Welcome to the Art Pod. I'm your host, Carolina, and I'll be your guide through this Pandora's box. Strap yourselves in for a journey through the art world where we bring you candid conversations, untold stories, uncover industry secrets, and celebrate the women who are shaping its future. Because in the Art Pod, the spotlight is always on the girls. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Art Pod. My guest today is Jil Weinstock. And I wanted to start by reading a little bit about Jil. She is an experienced executive and dedicated artist and arts professional who facilitates inclusivity by championing innovative programming that urges audiences to investigate, engage, and create. Throughout her 15-year career, she has held positions at the Whitney Museum, New Museum, and the Children's Museum of the Arts, where she helped shape exhibitions, programming, and financial sustainability that reach and engage new audiences. Weinstock holds the position of executive director at Baxter Street at CCNY since 2020 and facilitates inclusivity by championing lens-based artists at pivotal moments in their careers. Weinstock is represented by the Winston Watcher Gallery in New York City and Walter Maciel Gallery in Los Angeles, California. She works with rubber, photography, fabric, thread, and natural and human-made objects to draw memories from her past to create a sense of nostalgia within her work. In her practice, rubber is used as a material to preserve, binding together objects and the memories they elicit. The common objects she focuses on are consequently transformed. In her most recent sole exhibition, Unwanted Collaborator Fractured Landscapes, she created unconventional collages and illuminated pieces by mixing photography, plants encased in rubber, embroidery, thread, and fabric to explore the fragility and resilience found in the natural world, especially when faced with disruptive forces. Born in Los Angeles, California, she currently works and resides in New York City. She studied at the University of California, Berkeley, and San Francisco Art Institute, where she received her BFA and MFA respectively. Weinstock has completed residencies at the American Academy in Rome and the Museum of Art and Design in New York. Her work has been exhibited internationally and written about in the New York Times, the New Yorker, Art in America, New York Magazine, just to name a few. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I kind of wanted to start this interview by talking about Baxter Street. Mm-hmm. So could you let us know a little bit what Baxter Street is, your role there, kind of what a day-to-day might look like for an executive director of a nonprofit?
Yeah, sure. So Baxter Street at the Camera Club of New York started in 1884. So we're celebrating 140 years this year.
Wow.
And about 10 years in its current space, which is on Baxter Street. So Alfred Stieglitz was one of the main supporters of the organization when it first formed. And it was a bunch of, enthusiastic photographers getting together at Cooper Union, talking about creating a society for photographers. And then that group kind of split a couple years later into the New York Camera Club. And, they were talking about art and science and photography, but from different perspectives. And so Alfred Stieglitz felt like the group should come back together and continue those dialogues and really have deep conversations about what is photography. So it reformed into the Camera Club of New York. And so since it's been around for 140 years, it's been in 7 different spaces. Mm-hmm. Its last space before Baxter was on 37th Street. And it was a membership-based organization where it had a dark room, a communal dark room. People would come and develop film and prints and hang around and talk about photography, get panel discussions together, pin up images and have like impromptu exhibitions. But about 10 years ago, when Michi Jagarjian, who's the president of Baxter, along with the board, had decided that, people weren't using the darkroom in the same way, that was like the wet darkroom versus the dry darkroom. So people weren't using film and chemicals, they were doing more digital work. So they moved the organization to Baxter Street and created an exhibition space. Downstairs we have our residency workspace, and then 2 doors down we have our community educational space and project space. And then we created partnerships with ICP and other arts organizations and schools to use their darkroom if any of our residents or community members needed it. And then it became, we got rid of membership-based fees, and it's open and free to all. And so we do open calls. We have like I said, our residency program, our guest curated program. We just initiated a mid-career program. And we work with lens-based artists at pivotal moments in their career and to really help support them at any moment they're at. And to make it so it's more sustainable for them and they can move their practice with integrity and equity. So we really work hard with our artists and really support them every step of the way.
That's great. And can you tell us a little bit about maybe either current programming or upcoming programming that you're really excited about?
Yeah, we just opened an amazing show by one of our 2023 residents, Marta Naranjo Sandoval. And it's called The Flowering Wound, and it's really a gorgeous show, and definitely come and check it out. And we also have Michael Dayton Herman up in our project space called Reconstituted. And what I'm really excited about is we're doing our first ever block party on Baxter Street on May 11th between, we're taking over the whole block between Canal and Hester. And our organization works with a lot of partnerships with mission-aligned organizations. And so ICP, Magnum, Aperture are all coming to do, various workshops like zine workshops, cyanotype, sungrams, collage workshops. We're even working with the Worthless Studios, and they have an Airstream darkroom that they're bringing. So we're very excited. It's going to be a really wonderful community engaged, free, open to all ages, to just support, lens-based artists, the visibility of all the organizations, and to celebrate because, it's a real milestone, not just for Baxter Street, but for all the other organizations that continue to do the good community work.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I know recently Baxter Street was awarded $1 million from the Mellon Foundation, which is incredible. Can you tell us a little bit of maybe what you want to put that money towards at Baxter Street?
Yes, definitely. So I started at Baxter in 2020, as you said, and we had a strategic plan of really looking deeply into the organization and making sure that we were sustainable, not just for the artists, but for the organization itself, really thinking about the staff and thinking about our programs. And we hit all those points. And so you do a strategic plan every 3 years. So we started working on this strategic plan for the next 3 years. And really, we want to kind of dig deeper into the community engagement. And we realized that with all of our community members and the artists that we work with, there are a lot, and we just want to do more. So I really wanted to double our capacity. So with the art advisory board and the board, we came up with programs that, we can double our exhibitions, double our programming, double our staff, and really dig deep into community engagement. So that's really what we're going to focus on over the next 3 years is building a pipeline for, artists at any point in their career to come and be involved. So one of the aspects that we're doing for the community engagement that some of the Mellon money is going towards is the block party, but also our first community exhibition. So we did an open call and, opened it to students, to young people, to old people, anyone that is interested in participating in an exhibition, creating a 4x6 lens-based work. And we had the opening on May 11th. And it's really great to see all these new people kind of be engaged in our organization. So we just really want to understand what the community wants and then be able to give that.
That's fantastic. And then you also mentioned that Baxter Street has residencies. Can you tell us a little bit how somebody can apply to the residency, what the criteria is for the people that you choose?
Yeah, definitely. So our residency program was really developed by Alan Frame, who was one of the directors of the Camera Club about 10 years ago. And he, started to realize that if you could give funds and support and mentorship to these lens-based artists to kind of help them at their particular moment in their career, that would really be so useful. And so the residency program has developed over the years as a really wonderful entrance point into kind of having your first solo show in New York. So that's one of the requirements, is to not have had a solo show before. And to not be a student at the time you're applying. And other than that, it's to be over 18. So those three elements, requirements, you can apply. It's free. If you follow us either on Instagram or subscribe to our newsletter, we are always telling you when the open calls are happening, giving you links to that. And it's all free. You just need to have access to a computer, and if you don't, you can come in and do it in person, because we really want to be equitable and have a wide reach. And then the really most important thing is to be living in the 5 boroughs. We are a small but mighty organization, and we do a lot of one-on-one support. And so if you're not in the area, you really miss out, and you're really not getting the full kind of residency experience. And so we do an open call. We set up a jury. The jury is different every year. So I highly encourage people to apply more than once. A lot of times, they may not get picked for the residency, but they might get picked to do a group show, or another mentor on the jury really loved the work and wants to follow up with them. And that happens all the time. And then also, if you keep applying every year, you have different sets of eyes looking at your work. And I think that is really just the best way to be visible. So once we deliberate, we spend days and days looking at the applications. And what we're really looking at is how they're going to use the residency time. The workspace time is 3 months. And you have 24/7 access to our space, and in the space is a digital darkroom. We have camera equipment, we have an outdoor space for photo shoots, and we really encourage them to come in and use those 3 months as kind of an arts incubation time, pulling threads with different ideas. We set them up with mentors. We kind of connect them to our art advisory board members that we think will really help support their practice and what they're trying to do. And then we work with them over those 3 months. And so, and then after that, they have anywhere from 6 to 9 months to produce the work for their very first solo show. And then while they're doing that, our staff works really close with them. I work really close with them to help curate their show. They work with our communications consultant to kind of really think about what does it mean to put a strategy together for getting the word out there about your work. We work with an amazing art handler and preparator, so they really understand what it means to actually mount a show. And then once the show is up, it's up for about six to 7 weeks, and then we have a great conversation series, and that really is about thinking about the artist practice and their personality and what would be the most beneficial experience, not just for them but for the audience. So, for example, we had one artist, a Jamaican artist, Simon Benjamin, who really wanted to do a Saturday soup. And so we went in the backyard. He and his sister made a big pot of soup, and we brought in a curator, and we all sat and we just talked about his work while we had soup. And that was a really wonderful experience and really so connected to his practice that we really try hard to have it be really one-on-one. So that's kind of how the residency program works.
That's absolutely incredible, because you have no idea how many times artists, especially young artists, come to me and they're like, well, how do I get into a gallery? Or how do I get my first, exhibition? What are the steps? So the fact that you're actually providing not only space for these people to have time to work on their practice, but then in the end also get a solo show out of it is absolutely pivotal, I think, especially for artists just starting out.
Yeah, and we spend 18 months with them. So, it spans, it's a lot of professional development. They get funds. There's an artist stipend. They also get production funds for their show. But it's like I said earlier, we want to support them with integrity and sustainability. And so how do you do that? You do that by understanding what their personal needs are, and then giving them the knowledge and the experiences for them to kind of take it and then make it their own so they can be sustainable as they move forward. And we have such an amazing support system and track record to where all of our residents go on to, another residency or another show or gallery representation or that kind of next step. And we really support them along the way to do that.
That's really fantastic to hear. So we've learned a little bit about Baxter Street. Now I think it's time to learn a little bit about you.
Okay.
So I know that you're the director of Baxter Street. Could you tell us a little bit of what that entails? And running a nonprofit. I know the day-to-day is very varied for you, but could you tell me a little bit about your maybe biggest responsibilities at Baxter Street?
Well, like I said, we're a small organization, and nonprofits notoriously wear a lot of different hats, and everyone just takes on what the work needs to happen.
Yes.
What I love working at Baxter is, feeling like I can 100% back the mission and support the mission. So all my work is directed around that and supporting the artists and our staff. So I feel like, I do everything from, bookkeeping to report writing to proposal writing to working with the artists, doing studio visits, curating, talking to the staff to come up with innovative programming, working with our board, meeting new people that that are interested in hearing more about Baxter, funders. It really is varied, and that's what I love about it, is that no 2 days are the same.
Oh yeah,
at all.
I can imagine.
It's not a 9-to-5 job at all, and I think that at least the staff that we have at Baxter all wear many hats. They're artists, they're curators, they're writers. And I think all of that informs their arts practice as well as their arts administration practice, and that you really don't separate it. It all just becomes imbued into one kind of day. And so it really is so dependent. But I do have to keep track of, just our finances, making sure that, the artists are feeling supported, making sure the staff is feeling supported. And then also, the visibility of the organization, making sure that people hear about what we're doing, that they apply to our open calls, they apply to our jobs, they really understand what we do.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So I also mentioned in your bio that I read that you're also a practicing artist, which is in itself a full-time job. So I kind of wanted to talk about what the challenges are, and of, running a nonprofit while also being an artist and nurturing your own practice. What are some of the challenges? Maybe what are some of the rewards of that? And how do you balance the two?
That is a really great question. And I'm also a professor. I work with a lot of students at various art schools. And, no artist path is the same. There isn't this trajectory that you can say, if I do this, then I do this, then I do this. Mm-hmm. And when I was in graduate school, I was getting my MFA, I realized, it's hard to think, if you would ask me when I was 25 if I would be running an arts organization, I would have said, no, I'm not qualified to do that. That's not even part of my path. But I think all the choices that I've made over the last 20, 25 years has led me to being the ideal person to run an arts organization that focuses on artists, because I am an artist. And I think that, because of those two kinds of roles, they merge really wonderfully together, and they're in great partnership. And so, as I'm creating an ecosystem for Baxter Street and for the artists that I work with, it's also for my own practice. It's kind of it's a nuanced, relationship, but one informs the other. And so I feel really lucky to be able to do that. I think, carving out time, making sure that, I'm realistic about what I can take on and handle is really important. I've been very fortunate to work with some really amazing, strong women who really understand the balance of, wearing many hats and wanting to be able to pursue different callings, but understand that they all build upon each other. So I think as an artist, it's problem solving, it's, thinking about ideas, it's reading, it's supporting, it's creating, and I take all of that and put it into my arts administration hat as well. And so I think that those two kind of work in tandem.
Yeah, when you were describing Baxter Street to me and your mission and what you do with artists and how well you take care of them and nurture them, And then the fact that you're an artist, I'm like, that makes complete sense because you kind of understand already what artists need, especially in the early stages of their career. So I think you're right. I think you're kind of many hats merge into one in a really cohesive way.
Yeah. And I think just, I work with 2 galleries who are amazing, and they work with my busy schedule. And, I remember when I first started at Baxter and they're like, well, you're up for a solo show. I said, you know what? I think I need to push it off a year. I don't think I'll be ready. And they're like, okay, whatever you need. And so that's like what I'm saying is like really understanding what you need at that moment. And then allowing yourself to take that time. I think there's always like, oh, I have to take advantage of every opportunity. You do, but you can also be smart about it and say, you know what? I want to do it. I just don't know if I can do it right away. So let's think about how together we can make this work so we both feel like we're getting something out of it. And I think that that's really important too, is like finding your voice in that.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your practice?
Sure. I started, how far do you want me to go back?
I guess from the very beginning. I kind of want to follow your trajectory because I see that like professionally your work as an artist and then your work also as an arts professional were kind of in tandem. So I guess maybe let's start at the very beginning, maybe with your studies and then how you navigated both being an artist and an arts professional.
Okay. Well, I started at UC Berkeley as a physics major.
Wow.
And finished my first year, I remember meeting with my advisor. And she suggested that I do something fun over the summer. And I said, well, what does that mean? And so I always would go to New York with my mom in September before school started, and we would go to all the shows and the museums. We just loved doing that together, and it was like a tradition.
Was your mom in the arts at all, or?
She is an executive director for the Food Network and does films. Yeah, she's amazing. But not in the arts so much. And my dad's in the restaurant business. So food was definitely played a huge part in growing up. But so I decided to take a photography class in New York at Parsons for my, summer in between, and then also do an internship at a gallery. That was like, all right, I'm just going to go for it, try it out, see what it's like. And it changed my world. I came back and I started taking more art history classes, more studio practice classes, less physics classes. And by the time I was a junior, I had switched majors and became a double major in art history and practice of art, studio art. And I remember sitting down with my parents saying, I'm making a huge change. And, to their credit, they were 100% supportive, but they were also like, that's great, but you need to think about how you're going to make a living. Because once you graduate, what are you doing? Like, that's all fantastic and it sounds amazing, and I thought, I don't know. And so I just, kind of was reluctant, and I'm like, I can make it as an artist, and what does that mean? And just started talking to a lot of people in my program, my teachers, my advisors. And, but I always had a job in school, in high school. It was just part of, needed to work to make money to be able to live. And so I started doing more kind of like, was working in museums. I worked at the UC Berkeley Museum and in their archives, and then giving tours, and then started kind of doing educational programming. And I really loved that. So I started working with kids. And so then that just kind of became part of my interest. And so what isn't in my bio is that I have a master's in education for teaching in California. So I was teaching, it was one of my first jobs was teaching. And when I finished graduate school, I had a solo show in a gallery. San Francisco did this, they called it First Starts, and it was to give graduate students who, they chose to do their first solo show in a gallery in San Francisco. It was very exciting. And so when I had that, I was also teaching at the time. I realized, I kind of needed to take a break and kind of recalibrate and see like, how can I balance both of these? So I started doing both, but just pulling back and realizing part-time work is better for me instead of full-time work, so I can also do my studio practice. So I became very organized. Like,
Okay.
you know, Tuesdays and Thursdays was studio days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday were teaching days. And that's just kind of how I, you know, worked for many, many years. And so then when I was working I got picked up by a gallery, and I was working on my first solo show with them, and my work had shifted dramatically from my master's thesis to my new body of work. And that was the work I started using rubber and making castings and kind of thinking about the beauty industry growing up in Los Angeles.
Oh, I can imagine.
So that work was very different than the work that I had done in my master's, which was mostly photography related, more sculptural work, but playing around with the kind of formulation of light sensitivity. And so the owner of the gallery was not happy. They did not like the new work. It was not something that they felt they could stand behind. But the director I worked with loved the work, and we were doing studio visits, so it was just kind of a miscommunication. So I did the show, but that was the one and only show I did with them. And it was a very eye-opening experience, like really understanding how communication is so important, really understanding relationships are so important, and you really want to make sure that you are in a relationship that you feel you can thrive in. And so it was a bumpy start, to say the least.
Yeah, but a learning experience.
And then from there, I, you know, spent a couple years just really working on my work and understanding rubber was one of those materials that either people love or hate. And there's like, it created a kind of dichotomy of reactions, which I actually really enjoyed. And especially when I was dealing with the beauty industry, that was like a nice kind of, you know, you either love it or hate it, you know, beauty is pain. So we were like talking, you know, I was talking a lot about that in my work. And so, but, you know, it was I was in my early 20s. I was just, you know, formulating who I was. But I had lived in the Bay Area for 10 years, lucky enough to get picked up by a really great gallery that supported my new vision and my art, and we had wonderful studio visits. And when I turned 30, we decided to move to New York. I thought, like, let's try it. My husband and I at the time were sitting there, and I guess I was reading the New York Times. I don't remember this. And I said, oh, another show I'm never going to see. And so he said, we're moving to New York for a few years so you can see all the shows you want and do it, because we don't want any regrets in life. And I was like, oh, okay, let's do it. So we just picked up and moved to New York. And so I got my first job at the Whitney Museum. And that was an amazing experience. But I also thought artistically, like, oh, it'll be easy. I have gallery representation. I do solo shows in California. I'll just come into New York and it'll be really an easy transition. And it was not. It was very, very challenging. And it didn't matter all the things I'd done before. To them, I was just a new artist. They had no idea who I was, what my work was about. So that was a very interesting opportunity and a challenge. And so I had decided to set up these kind of art salons in my studio and get together with, create a community. You know, I was new to the New York area as well, didn't know a lot of people, knew a handful. So invited them and they invited people. And then we would have these art salons where we would share our, work with one another, what we were doing, what, if we felt we needed help on writing a proposal or got stuck on an idea. And it was a really wonderful opportunity, and it kind of grew. And what was really fascinating about this, and I recommend it to all young people now, is really starting to think about carving out and curating a community for yourself, especially people of your peer group, because those are the ones you grow up with. Yeah. So all those people I met when I was 30 are now heads of organizations, running, amazing gallery spaces, writers, they all have taken off in their careers, and we all have grew up together professionally and personally. And so they're my biggest mentors, my biggest confidants. We support one another. And that's how I also kind of create this ecosystem, as an artist and at Baxter Street, because, you really started to develop these strong relationships and a great understanding of where everyone started. So, but that really helped because it was like more visibility, creating communities. So I got picked up by a gallery about 2 or 3 years into living in New York.
And how did you go about getting picked up by this gallery? Did you just go and network with them? Did you do a submission process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, one of my mentors growing up said to me that people who work in the art world or who are creatives do it because they love looking at work. They love talking to artists. It's like their favorite thing to do. And so, but you have to be smart about it, strategic. You're not going to just blanketly send out 40 to 60 cold calls to galleries that maybe their mission isn't aligned with your work. Like maybe they only show abstract painting and you're a portrait photographer. Yeah. Don't waste their time, don't waste your time. So it was really starting to think about like how to be strategic and doing research and figuring out, going to openings, going to galleries, seeing the artists that they show, seeing the work that they show, looking at artists where, I would love to know the trajectory of their career and looking at where they showed 10 years prior, 15 years prior, and what were their first kind of solo shows. And so really understanding like the trajectory of their experiences made me think like, oh, so there were a handful of galleries that I felt would be really interested in seeing my work. And so with these salon type gatherings, I would invite them. And it was an opportunity where it wasn't, they could come, they could have a wide range of experiences. They could look at different artists. It's not just this intense one-on-one experience, which sometimes a lot of people are nervous about because they want to be in, they're in this like position where they don't, know how to interact with the artist if they don't really like the work or if it doesn't really fit with their program. Yeah. And they're busy. So so that was kind of how I started inviting the people that worked at the galleries that I really liked, that I felt my work had a connection with. I'd go to the openings. I would introduce myself at other points of my visits. Mm-hmm. The openings aren't the best time to bug them.
Their openings are usually crazy.
Yeah, and openings are really to support the artist. Yeah. And but you can always go back on a quieter time and then introduce yourself. And then just gauge, would they be interested in seeing your work? So when I still had the gallery that I worked with in California. So I was producing a solo show and the work was about to go out. So after inviting them to the studio and kind of developing a relationship with them, that's when I was bold and said, well, why don't you come to the studio, see all the work before I ship it out? Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity for you to see the show in its entirety. And because it's going to California and it may not come back here to New York. So that's where, but that was after a lot of developing relationships and having conversations. And so this one gallery came in, a gallerist, and we just hit it off. She loved the work. It was amazing. So we set up a solo show, or we did. She took some of the work to introduce it to her collectors. I think I was part of a group show, and then we set up a solo show like a year later.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned that. And I feel like I always say this also to artists. I feel like your gallerist that relationship is incredibly intimate. They really have to understand you, and, you really have to be on the same page because they will nurture you and your career. It's almost like a marriage. So for any artist, really do your due diligence, who you really want to work with. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I always tell everyone that it is a very intimate relationship, and you should treat them the way you would treat any of your intimate relationships and friends. Mm-hmm. Because some of the students I have, they're like, well, but do you not tell them this? I said, well, would you not tell your best friend that? Yeah. And no, I would tell them. I said, well, then that's what you do. Like, transparency, communication is the key to any strong relationship. And so if you can't have that with your gallerist or the director, it's going to be a very hard road and not a satisfying one. Yeah. And so I think it is really important to kind of develop those relationships, and sometimes they take time. That's the other thing. Sometimes it's electric and you just know right off the bat, But a lot of times it takes, it's like courting, just like when you're meeting new people and you put your best self forward, but you also like want to explain where you're coming from and your story and what your work is about. And so, yeah, I do. I 100% agree. And when it's right. And that's what feels really good.
Yeah. So when you first came to New York, you mentioned you worked at the Whitney. Can you tell me kind of how you got that job? Because you were obviously coming from like a different state, you're new to New York. So how did you either apply or did you get the job through word of mouth, and what was kind of your role there?
I started looking at jobs when I was still living in California, knowing our move date. And at the time, I had a very specific work experience. And so it was really kind of hard to think about, well, where do I go from here? I've worked, I was a professor. I worked with a program called LEAP, which was I worked in the schools as an artist, working with young kids. I worked on collaborative big projects. I curated shows. Like I had a lot of interests, and I wasn't really sure like what kind of job that would look like. And so I just remember just reading at the time, is in the classifieds and going on all the museum websites and looking at their job postings and understanding like, what's my dream job? What's like a job that I would be happy to have? And I was really lucky in that this one particular job at the Whitney was, it was called Youth Insights, and they were just starting the program with Sandra Jackson. And it was exactly like fit my skill set so well in that it was part education, part curatorial, part working with young people and working with artists. And you crossed both departments, both the education and curatorial department, and it was part-time. So I was like, oh my gosh, and of course, like when you get super excited, it's hard to like calm down and like say, okay, let's figure this out. Let's be mindful. And so it was just really thinking about like, how do I describe my enthusiasm and my skill set without being inauthentic, right? Like, how do I do that? And so it was just a lot of like figuring out the cover letter was really important. I think that most people think a cover letter is just not that important. And it's like a one, paragraph thing. But I think it's really important. I think if you can grab them in that first 4 or 5 sentences, and make them want to continue to read and get to know you, it's really important to put the effort into that. And then also distilling all of your interests and enthusiasm and skills without making it sound like it's just a list of accomplishments. Yeah. And so again, I'm very big on research. So like I researched a lot about the program, a lot about the kind of, schedule of events that were coming up at the Whitney, what was happening. And so I sent a cover letter and my resume, but I also sent it to Sandra, even though I knew it was a big organization and it wasn't just the human resources. So I also sent it to her saying that I sent it to the human resource department. But I just really wanted to take this opportunity to, introduce myself and explain. And so she responded right away and she said, amazing, I'm going to talk to them and we'll set up an interview. So I think like that personal touch too, it wasn't just, again, sending out 40 different emails to various people saying I need a job. And so I met with her on the phone. And then when we were flying out to New York to look for housing, I met with her then again, and it just was a great fit. It was just one of those amazing opportunities. And so I did that for several years, and it was in its beginning stages and it's still a program today. And they wanted me to take it on full time. And that was one of those moments of like, I love it. I get so much out of it. But if I do that, I feel like I'm saying goodbye to being a practicing artist. And that was also at the same time where I was having challenges as an artist being here and trying to get my foot in the door. So it was one of those moments in life where I felt like, I'm at a crossroads. If I do this, then I'm really going to be an arts administrator and let go of being a practicing artist. And so I just wasn't ready to do that. So I told them I couldn't take it full time, but it did need a full time person. So they, I stayed until they hired the right person, and then I moved on to a different project. And I was, I guess several years later, I was always wondering, God, I wonder if my life would have gone differently if I had taken that path. Like maybe I could be, the head of the new museum or whatever, I don't even know. But
shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah, shoulda, woulda, coulda. But now looking back at it, no, I did the right thing for me, and I am now ended up as a leader in an amazing organization that I just love. And so I feel really validated and so supported in those decisions at the time. And again, I leaned on a lot of my mentors and a lot of the people in my community, like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And that was also a moment in time too, where I had to think about, what do I want as an artist? Maybe I need to shift that. Maybe I just need to figure out what is driving me to spend all of my free time in the studio when I could be doing so many other things. And working so hard to get a paycheck to then put it towards materials for my shows. Like, why am I so possessed in doing that? And what is my hope in the end? And so I think that was also one of those moments too, where I had to kind of recalibrate and think about, well, what is next? Like, what do I want as an artist? And maybe what I wanted when I was 20 is so different than what I want when I'm 30, which is so different than what I want when I'm 40.
Yeah.
And I think that allowing that space and growth has been really wonderful. And even my work has totally shifted too. Like the last show I had at Winston Wachter, The Unwanted Collaborator, Fractured Landscapes, is kind of going full circle because I brought photography back into my practice. Photography has always been there, especially in the compositions that I create. And I'm always thinking about it as a frozen moment in time, especially with my sculptures. But so photography has always been like the composition, the foundation, but I wasn't really using the photographic process. And so this one in particular has kind of come back full circle, and it feels really great. And I think that as an artist, it's really wonderful to kind of look back at all of the bodies of work you're created and to know that they're so connected. And like I could show work from 20 years ago to now, and you would see the connection and you would see my hand in it. You would know that I created it, and that is really satisfying.
Do you think that you reincorporating photography back into your work had anything to do with your time working with lens-based artists at Baxter Street?
100%. Yeah. I think that, in addition to, I hate to say it, COVID, because, when you're locked down and the only thing you can do safely with your family is to be outside, there was a lot of, we did a lot of hiking, a lot of walking, and that's when I incorporated a lot of plant life and taking photographs of just, nature, like really having that feeling of being outside during COVID was so different than prior to that for me, in that it felt like a safe space, a new space, it's a beautiful space. I wasn't taking it for granted. How do you capture everything that you're seeing and feeling in one image? And so I just started picking up the camera and trying to record that for myself, really just to bring it into the studio, just so I had that. And like I said, I worked in rubber, and, you wear a respirator. It's very toxic. Yeah. So the idea of wearing a mask to create during COVID, I couldn't do it. So I just really started working with works on paper, teaching myself how to embroider, playing around with thread, kind of putting aside the rubber practice part. And that's where photography also kind of, crept into that practice. But it's funny, it happened prior to when I started Baxter. But I think the reason why I was so excited about Baxter was because I'd already started incorporating that. And it was like, it felt full circle. I studied photography at San Francisco Art Institute, and Larry Sultan was one of my advisors. And so even just coming back full circle in that way was amazing.
So when you, just to backtrack a little bit, so when you finished at the Whitney, where did you move on to next? Because now you're obviously, you've found a gallery that in New York that you wanted to work with. You finished your job at the Whitney, and then you moved on to another place. Could you let us know a little bit about where and what the position was?
From there, I worked at the New Museum when it was on Lafayette Street. And I worked with Ann Barlow, who was the Director of Education and Community Development. And we were working on a project called Visual Knowledge, which was really, again, something similar to Young Arts. I mean, not Young Arts, the position at Whitney, where we would, work with high school and college students to help prepare them for careers in art. And so how, mentoring them and going into the schools, going into having positions at the New Museum, and then also curating. And so that was really, it was very similar to Youth Insights, what I did there. And I think the reason why I probably got the job was because of my, experience over the last years at the Whitney. And it was such a successful program that it was really great to kind of be a part of setting up something similar at the New Museum. So I did that for a couple of years. And again, it did great. And they wanted a full-time person after that because it just took off. And so I left. And then around that time is when I was pregnant with my first child. And so I decided to go back into teaching because it was much more flexible. I could do it during the day, and so it really just kind of fit within my schedule. So I took a little break from there, and I worked at the New School. I worked at SVA. I was an adjunct professor, moving all around, and I loved it. And I taught a class called Professional Practices, among others, but that was my favorite. And the reason why I loved that class was it took everything I learned from the two museums that I worked with, as well as working with young people, and understanding that I wish I had a class like that when I was in graduate school, because, learning how to write an artist statement, learning how to even develop your practice, being a studio artist is very isolating. You don't talk about that. You're alone in your studio, whereas when you're in school, you're surrounded by your peers, you're constantly in critique. It's a very different atmosphere than when you're alone working in your studio. And then just understanding taxes and, applying for jobs and the gig economy and how do you move, through life. And so I just felt like it was really important to set up those kinds of educational systems for students. And so that I really love teaching that. So I taught that really for like almost 10 years at the various schools. And then once I could get kind of back into work a little bit more as my child was a little older, that's when I was at the Drawing Center. And I worked in there with Amy Good, who is the community and education director, and she's amazing. And we worked with high school students and worked on projects with them and curated their shows. And it was kind of like, coming back to where I first started. And so I really enjoyed that. From there, I went to be the curator and artistic director at the Children's Museum of the Arts.
Yes.
And I was there for 8 to 9 years. I was there for quite a while. And I loved it. That took all of the some experiences I had into one position, which was just amazing. And I worked with Barbara Hunt McClanahan. She and I met when I first moved to New York, and she gave me my very first group show when she was the director of Artist Space. And we, again, became, really wonderfully close. And it was just one of those ironic, weird moments where I had applied to be the curator. And at the time, the board of directors had said they're just hiring an executive director. And so I said, you know what, you should wait and hire, because the executive director might want to hire their own curator, or, I think that let's take a beat. And then the next day I get a phone call from Barbara, and she said, take the job. I'm like, how do you know about the job? She's like, because I'm the one that they're courting to be the ED.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you kidding me? She's like, we'll work together. It's going to be amazing. So we ended up working together and joining at the same time and just really revamping the museum. And it was so fun to work with her. And we had, a 3,000 square foot gallery space. And she was really open to my program, which was really to bring artists that are dealing with, socially, politically challenged ideals in their artwork and bring it to families so they can have conversations about it. And that was amazing. It was amazing to curate shows for multi-generations and to bring them in and to do art projects based on what they're looking at. And to also bring artists like, Hank Willis Thomas and Vanessa German and a bunch of other artists to these families who might not have ever experienced their work before. And what I loved about the museum was that it was an opportunity to bring people in to an arts museum that might not go in or feel comfortable going into other arts organizations. And so giving them the tools and the support to feel like they belong here and that they can, learn from here, allowed them to go to the other bigger museums. And that was a really wonderful opportunity.
Yeah. So how did you then, because the Children's Museum was right before Baxter, so how did you end up leaving Children's Museum and then going to Baxter?
Yeah, well, it's a sad story, but Barbara had developed pancreatic cancer, and she declined very, very quickly. And she had asked me to stay until, they found someone to replace her. Mm-hmm. So when she passed away, I had told the board that I would stay and I would be the interim ED, artistic director, until they found someone that they really loved. And so I knew that I was leaving. I just didn't know when. And so it took them a while to find the person. And so once they did, I said, okay, I'll stay 3 months to help onboard or for however long. And unfortunately, when he started, 3 weeks later, we shut down for COVID.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was a really challenging time for everyone. And especially, an arts organization that caters to kids when they weren't in schools and what was happening and we don't know. And so we had to pivot to online, and what did that look like? And, we were a huge organization. We were almost a $4 million organization, operational support and budget. And we had 75 teaching artists, 25 full-time people. And so it was a lot for someone just coming in. So I stayed for as long as, he needed me and felt like he was ready. And once he pivoted and had his vision and he was ready, I was like, okay. And meanwhile, it's COVID and I have 2 kids at home, and I was like, I think I need a break. But what was interesting was, when I was leaving the museum, I sent out an email to everyone and said, here's my personal email address. Let's stay in touch. Zoe Buckman, who's an artist that I curated at CMA, is on the board of Baxter Street.
Oh, okay.
And so she said, you need to meet Michi Jagarjian, who's the president of Baxter. They're looking for a director and you'd be amazing. I'm like, I don't know. I think I need some time and it's just meet. So I applied.
That's how it starts.
Yeah. And I should have known. And then, so I was on a Zoom call with Michi, and, it's, my kids are at home, my husband's at home, everyone can hear everything. Yep. I get off the call, and my husband Eric's like, so you're going to go for that job, aren't you? And I was like, because I kept saying, no, I'm going to take time off. And he's like, you're going for that. I'm like, yeah, once you meet Michi, it's kind of hard to say no. She's so dynamic and amazing. So I just felt so I was very fortunate. And it just, she's like, can you start now? And I'm like, well, I just need a little more time. And so, so that was how I pivoted to that.
It all goes back to relationships.
Yeah.
And I say this all the time. The art world is a very small place, and the community that you make for yourself, you always end up leaning on somebody to kind of get, somewhere else in life, or word of mouth, or, my friend recommended this or this. So it's really important to have those relationships.
I agree. And I think that, visibility too is like if you're, like, for example, when I was saying earlier for artists to, apply to a residency program that shifts every time, you're creating your community there, and you're creating the relationships.
Yep.
And so, I want to make it possible that it's always free and equitable and anyone can apply, because that gives them the opportunity to forge these relationships and to be in front of the people that can help support them and guide them.
Yeah.
And so I do agree. And it's funny because, a lot of the artists that I would curate into the shows at CMA, I'd also get curated into their shows because it was such a great experience. They loved enjoying working with me. And, obviously I gravitated towards artists of work that I appreciated and respected and had some kind of connection to. And so then when they were doing shows, let's curate your work into it. So I was constantly flipping and flopping back to being a curator, to then being the artist, to being, running a program, to, being an educator. And there was so much overlap, and there was so much overlap with the people too, because as most artists have multi-hyphenate jobs. And so they also are working in all these different things. And it's funny because it is connections that you make with people and that you kind of forge those relationships with. And it's really, really important.
Yeah. And that was one of my next questions is, while you're at the new museum, the Children's Museum, you're also obviously still making work and showing. How do you manage that? I know you've mentioned it before, you take certain days to do your work, and then you've had jobs that were part-time before. But how do you navigate that while doing all of this?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I did is I moved my studio into our home, which was great. Most people don't like that. I love it because I can go up there for 2 hours or in between, a break, or late at night or early in the morning before I head out. And I think that, being an artist isn't just having studio time, it's also space to think. And so I think that that's also important. So creating those moments of opportunities to think, to read, and then also to create is really, really important. And so if I'm reading something or doing something that's informing a project I'm doing at Baxter, it also is of interest to me, and I'll pick things out of that I should look more deeply into that for my own work. And even talking to artists and hearing more about what they're working on in their practice and how, it connects to mine, that also is very fruitful. And I think that you just find the moments in the day to create. And I'll know when I have scheduled a show or I'm going to be a part of something. I let everyone know, like, this is going to be a very busy time for me personally, so I'm going to front load this stuff. I'm going to take some vacation time here. I have that big solo show in September, so I took a break from teaching for the semester because I knew that I wouldn't be able to handle both. I have very loving and forgiving kids and a partner, and they give me lots of space, and they know it's important time. But also when the kids were younger, they'd be up in the studio doing their homework, and we would just be working together. So I think even having that too, and not feeling this is separate, I need to be on my own. It's more of I've always loved having community and energy around, in the form of my kids or in the form of my friends. But yeah, so I think just really creating that time, having the studio at home, and then and allowing the space and time to do that.
Yeah, no, it seems like you have it all figured out.
Well, no, but
but so, because another one of my next questions was going to be well, if you're preparing for a big solo show, what do you do? But then you said, you make that time, you take the vacation days, you mentally prepare yourself and put that first. But it seems as time goes on, you've really learned how to really organize your time and how to juggle things.
Yeah. I just think that as also a mom, you have to, you just, and funny enough, I'm not an organized person, or I wasn't. And, my mom teases me because she's like, you were the biggest slob. And now I'm fully organized, and things have their place. And But I think like out of necessity too. And also, for example, when I was working towards a group show during COVID, and like I said, I was teaching myself embroidery and I was outside a lot, in the car rides, I would be sitting there working as I was talking, and sewing as I was, part of the family. And even just sitting and for watching a movie, I'm like cutting things out or doing stuff. So just multitasking too also has been something that I work on a lot, and I've always enjoyed that. Some people like to just have one project and finish it. I like to have a lot of different things all at once. And I think that's probably because they all inform each other.
Yeah.
So it's a great way for me to practice. And then having studio visits, making sure people are checking in on me, like, so we need to see where the work is. So let's come and check it out. And being realistic about what I can handle and what I can't is also important. But I just love what I do. So it just, I'll stay up till 2, 3 in the morning. I think I get that from my dad. He's like, does not sleep. And I can stay up really late and then get up really early. And, there are times where I have to, rest. But if I'm energized and, enthusiastic about what I'm doing, I just like have to do it.
So do you have any upcoming group or solo shows?
Yeah, I have a solo show in Los Angeles, Walter Maciel Gallery in November. I'm working on a few group shows. Some works are going to go there. And I'm in talks with a museum show. I can't talk about it, but I'm very excited. Okay. And, everything's crossed. But I hope that happens too. I think that, it's so interesting because I spend a lot of my time helping support artists, and a lot of people in my life are always like, well, you need to support yourself too, and you need to, put some energy into your career. And I think that, what's interesting in working at Baxter was I was part of the gallery that I work with had shown some of my work at a fair, and some of my colleagues, some other artists and stuff saw it, and they were like, wait, are you the same? They didn't even know I was an artist. And I was like, yeah, because I don't promote it or talk about it at work. And that's a tricky balance too, trying to figure out the nuanced, partnership of being an artist, but also supporting other artists, and how do you create that ecosystem and move that along. But I think for me, it's like creating, community engagement and artistic expression can exist in both.
Yes.
And I think that's really what drives my art practice, as well as, working in an arts organization. And then I love it because, when I've met artists now who I've mentored, and now they're really interested in my work and want to hear all about it and how I got started. And then also, bringing back the rubber part, this idea of freezing a moment in time, or having it be more like nostalgic and kind of, making it more like an archive, or, like when you have a bee stuck in amber. And so working in rubber has also been one of my main materials. And like I said, I took a break from it, but then came back to it, but in a different way. When I first started working with that material, everyone kept saying it's for mold making. It's not a final material. It's not this, it's not that. And that just made me want to figure it out even more and do a ton of research and work with a person that helped me make it more archival and put, pigments in it to make it more stable. And, a lot of the gallerists that I'd work with, they're like, Ava Hess, the material just disintegrates. And I said, I know, but this is a different material. It's, I'm using it in a different way, but it will age over time, because that's why I want to use it too. I want it to show history. So even like talking about materiality with artists in that way is also like a way that I can then talk about their work, but then they can also understand my work. So,
what I really, also there's a great Eva Hesse show now, I think at Hauser and Wirth that they just opened. But, there's a long history of artists, especially contemporary artists, using these different materials to make art. so why not? Why not rubber? Why not use it as your final product and experiment with it and, do something that's uniquely your own in your practice?
Yeah. And I'm so happy that I have, because at the beginning it was had a lot of negativity and not much support around it. But again, that was one of those moments, especially, and when we talked about like in my 30s where I was switching jobs and just moved to New York, do I dig in and continue to work on what I'm working on, or do I, look for other materials and other opportunities for what I want to do visually? And I realized that no, this is what I want to do. This is what's important to me, and I'm going to figure it out. And people are either going to like it or they're not. And that's the thing is, as an artist, you can't worry about what people think about your work. If you feel good about it and what you're putting out there, and it's meaningful to you, it will reach people.
100%.
Yeah.
So I like to end on asking my guests any advice that they might have for, well, in your case, for somebody who's an artist who's also, might need to manage an arts career with their practice. What sort of advice would you give to those either coming into the art world or currently kind of struggling to figure out their way?
Yeah. I think really taking a kind of deep audit on why you want to be an artist and what you're hoping to get out of it, really picturing your journey as an artist, and then figuring out the small steps to get there. And then surrounding yourself with people that are supportive, that are part of your community, that understand you, and not just art people. I think that, my husband's not an artist. He's an engineer by trade, and but his brain works very differently than mine, and so I really appreciate that. So when I talk to him about certain ideas or things that I'm trying to work on, he brings a perspective that's totally different. He also brings a perspective when I show him what I'm working on. I don't get it, or what is this, or I don't know. And it's good to hear that, because sometimes you're so caught in your own head and your own space. You're like, this is amazing, and then they're like, yeah, no. So I think that really trying to figure out why you're doing what you're doing, and then surround yourself with people that can help support that. I always try and say yes to every opportunity, because you never know where it's going to lead. And being open to that. I think, setting up realistic expectations is always really good too. And then knowing what you can handle and what you can't. So sometimes it's important to kind of take that full-time job and do it for a year or two to save money, to then pivot, or, continue to do the part-time work so you can create space for your studio practice. And I think that it's also important to keep up and nurture those relationships with people, because you never know where it's going to lead and how it's going to help support you. But then again, just research. I think it's so important, especially with the internet now, that you have the ability to really do a deep dive into artists you like, organizations you like, job possibilities and opportunities, and then really kind of figuring out what excites you and then going for that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think managing expectations, your own and others, is important, and really organizing yourself, because I've been in predicaments myself before where, I've taken on way too much than I can handle, and then I just kind of have to grit and bear through it. But, you also don't want to go through life like that. You want to enjoy what you're doing, and having ample time to say, you know what, this is what I have space for right now.
Yeah, and I do think as women, we try and take on everything and do everything and not disappoint. But in the end, it's you that you have to be the caregiver for, and figure out what you can and cannot take on, what you want to take on, and then how do you create that? And there'll be disappointments, and I think, there's always struggles and there's always challenges, but as long as you recognize that and feel those feelings, but then understand that you can get on the other side of it. And then how do you get on the other side of that? And that's where your community can help support you and any mentors that you have. And we all come up against hard decisions and things that we have to decide, and, and it's hard not to have regrets and to understand like, oh, I should have done this, or, like you said, woulda, shoulda, coulda. But I do think that that's just part of growth. And, as long as you're not in harmful ways, you're just in challenging ways, persevering and moving forward is always really great.
Yeah. Speaking of challenges, do you feel like you had any unique challenges as a woman in the industry throughout your either artistic or professional career?
It's a good question. I mean, I think I've had moments where I was sent an email. I was teaching, and I was sent an email for a contract for one of my co-workers who we were the same. And he was making almost twice as much as I was making. And I was like, what is going on? Yeah. And so that was very enlightening and disheartening. And I was like, how do I approach this? And so I just approached it by saying, thank you so much for the raise increase. I'm very excited. I look forward to starting in the fall, because I was just going to move forward. Yeah. And then they said, oh, actually, this was the wrong contract. I said, well, then I think we need to have a conversation. So, so I've had moments of those that have been really shocking to me, that still exists even now.
Yes.
But I think, I've been so privileged to have amazing mentors and women, strong women in my life. And I seem to gravitate towards that when I'm working, whether it's in a museum or teaching, or, even my gallerists have mostly all been women. So it is very interesting. I did have one experience where I was pregnant with my daughter, and I was 8 months pregnant, and the gallery that I had been working with for several years was closing. And she really loved me and believed in the work and said, I want to introduce you to this gallery. I think that your work will fit perfectly in there. Can we set up a studio visit? And I said, sure. So they came, and I was 8 months pregnant, and they walked in, they were like, and they didn't know how to react. And I was like, huh. So we did the whole, whatever, and shared the work and talked about it. And they were really taken aback, and I don't know why. And they said that, yeah, let's do a group show. I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this? And they said, yes. And so we did. And then I think it was about a year later, I was installing a solo show with them, and my little one was running around, and she had taken her diaper off and had done a little whatever in the gallery, and I thought, oh gosh, this is that. But they were cool about it. But it was definitely one of those things of I felt embarrassed, and I felt like I was doing something wrong, and I thought, no, I should feel okay about this. And this is life, it's messy, and this is what it's about. But I do think that I have had moments where I've worked with people that it's saying things like, oh, you're being too emotional, or oh, you're being too this. And as when I was younger, that was always really, I took it to heart. And now as I'm older, I feel like I can be emotional. I'm an emotional person. I'm a human being. I feel it's okay. And what you just said really bothers me. And so I think that would be one thing I would tell young people is to, which I think they are now more, is talking, is being present and saying when something's uncomfortable, addressing it.
Yes.
And I think when I was working in the bigger institutions, I didn't necessarily have that, and HR wasn't necessarily something that you felt comfortable you could go to. And so I think that's really important. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, because obviously apart from the child aspect, because I don't have children, I've faced all of those things myself. And the fact that they're still happening and it's, 2024, I think we still have a lot of work to do and a lot of changes still need to be made. And people should also understand that, women can be mothers, they can be directors, they can be all these things. And as you've perfectly proven, can multitask on a multitude of projects and still get amazing results.
Yeah. And I mean, it is crazy that it still happens now. Like in my world, it just feels like everyone's equal. We just need to all work together to help support one another. And so when you see these discriminations, it's really hard to understand that people don't all think that way.
Yeah, no. And I mean, I've seen changes being made in the right direction, but I think they're still a little slow. But it's still disheartening when things like this happen, because like you said, I feel like we should all be equal at this point. It's been so many years, but it's obvious that women face a lot of challenges in the workplace, back then and still.
Yeah. And I do think that, part of Baxter Street's platform is really to help, support and create equitable environments and really feel like giving them the platform to say what they need to say through their work. And even just internally, staff-wise, because we all wear so many different hats, really understanding if the work gets done, take the time off, do this, do that. Let's find a balance, because it's so important, especially if you go to a job every day, it becomes what you do the majority of your day.
Yes.
You do need to figure out ways to balance that. And I'm not necessarily certain that all environments are like that and that the culture needs to shift. And I think that, doing it smally in my world, I hope makes a difference and mentors, the next kind of group of people rising up.
Yeah. So now that we're coming close, to the end of the interview, I wanted to maybe have a little bit of time for 2 fire round questions.
Okay.
So I'll ask you a question depending on the number that you pick. So let me know which number you'd like between 1 and 10, and I'll read the corresponding question.
Okay. 7.
7. What is something that you think everyone should experience in their lifetime?
Oh gosh, that's hard.
Yeah, these are all hard.
That's hard. We were doing so well. I think, the first thing that came to my mind was freedom. And I don't know in what capacity, but I just feel like I would love to have everyone experience the feeling of freedom, whether that's, freedom of expression, freedom of constraints, freedom to, live the life they want to live. I just think that, however that looks, is to be able to have that feeling. And I think that would be, that's my answer.
I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing, honestly, just thinking about the chaos of the world in general and everything, and just humanity in general. I think we were put here on this place to experience freedom. I think that's a luxury that many of us can experience, and others can't, unfortunately. But I feel like that's something that everyone should have a right to experience when they live on this planet. So I think that's beautiful.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. One last question.
3.
3. Lucky number 3. If you could talk to anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh gosh. I think I'd really want to talk to Ava Hess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense with the work that you do.
Yeah. I had an experience with Louise Bouchard. She used to do these, I don't know what they were called, studio visits, or she would have these salon gatherings in her studio / living space, which was on 22nd Street in Chelsea. And I remember going, I was, it was 20 years ago, and just felt so nervous to meet just an iconic woman artist. And we sat down, and it was very similar. There were 4 or 5 other people. We were all artists, and she would, serve these like drinks of whiskey or scotch, and she's like, no, you have to drink it. And I'm like, oh, but I don't really drink. Like, drink it. And so, and then you would present your work, and it was such a magical experience, something I will never forget, and so impossible to describe. It was just like, trying to be so present that I think having that kind of experience with Eva Hess, and just even understanding at a time where she was creating work as a woman in a man's world,
Yes.
and really forging ahead with new materials and really pushing the boundaries of art and discourse and experimentation. I just, I would love to hear more about that.
I love the fact that you bring up Louise Bourgeois, because she's like my art history idol. And I never got the chance to meet her, unfortunately. So hearing these stories and the fact that you got to personally meet her is so great. I know I did my undergrad thesis on her, and I've been obsessed with her work for forever. So she's like one of my, so if anyone ever asked me that question, that's my answer. So I love the fact that you actually got that chance to meet her and talk to her.
I mean, I was in a similar position. So that was one of the most let me rephrase that. I've never been starstruck before. And that to me was like, being in her presence was like hard for me to even formulate talks or language or anything. Cause I was so in awe of her and studied her and wrote so much about her. So yeah.
Yeah. No, she's so great. And she had such a sassy personality.
Such a sassy personality. I mean, it really came through.
Yeah.
Like she was just, she would like yell at you. Yeah. But saying really nice things.
Yeah. No, I've seen some of the interviews she's done, and I'm like, this lady. And it's actually funny because the intro to the Art Pod, when the music plays in the beginning, there's actually a few words by her.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I pulled it from one of her interviews because, well, she's Louise and I love her. So
yeah, that's amazing.
So yes, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed our talk, and I think we covered a lot of really great topics and had a wonderful conversation. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun. It's very easy to talk to you. And thank you for your interest in my career and trajectory as an artist. And that's really nice.
Yeah, of course. And for anyone who would love to get in touch with Jil, just please shoot me a message. I love putting people in touch. Wherever we can help that's the whole point of this podcast. So please send me a message if you'd love to connect with Jil. And then I'll see everybody back here for the next episode. Thank you for watching. Bye.